Welcome to Live at 5. My name is Mark Wainwright. You're watching the Well Church. Well, good evening and welcome to the Well Church. It is great that you have been able to join with us here again this afternoon, and we want to welcome you to be part of what is happening here at the Well Church this afternoon. You know, the psalmist wrote, "We give thanks to you, O God, we give thanks for your name is near." And today, even though we are separated and we are distant from each other, some will be close to the Well Church in Wakefield, others will be in different countries all the way around the world. Yet we are joined together by a God to whom distance is no issue. God is so very near to each of us, even right now. And it might be that some of you who are watching today, that you just need to be reminded that God is close. He's right in the midst of what you are facing, whatever that is. See, we've got a God who is able to make a difference. And I would challenge you this evening, if that's you, to call out to him and to ask him to show you the difference that he makes. And maybe, just maybe, through this broadcast this evening, he's going to do just that. Well, as we do begin tonight's broadcast, we've got some worship songs that we're going to sing along with, where we're going to give God some praise. Then we've got explainer videos, a cartoon. Luke is going to tell us who his favorite Bible character is. And then Becky is going to give us 3 Bible verses to see whether you can guess which book they are from. And if you can guess it right, be sure to let us know in the comments. And then, of course, we've got Pastor Harry, who will be bringing us a message tonight too. This time it's all about taking the narrow path. So hang around for that. It's going to be great. But before we begin, let me just pray for us all first. God, as we join together once more as a church, as a community, we want to focus our attention upon you. We ask that you will make yourself known to each of us, particularly those who are seeking you right now. God, we ask that you will meet the very different needs of those who are watching, that you will refresh our memories once more to the good things that you have done for us and that you do for us, that we might be even more eager to give you all the praise that we have in our hearts.
A father was out walking in the countryside with his son. Whilst they were on their way, they came across a nest of eggs. As the boy looked closer, he saw, to his delight and amazement, that a baby chick was hatching. But as the baby chick looked and saw the boy, it got startled and ran the other way looking for protection. The boy was saddened by this and asked his father how he could tell the chick that he wanted to help him and not scare him. The father smiled and said that the only way he could do that was to become a chick himself, and then enter into the chick's world. He could then explain that in a way that the chick could understand. For God to restore the relationship between mankind and himself, he needed to come into this world and become one of us. Leaving heaven, Jesus entered our world in order to pay our penalty for turning away from God. That penalty meant he needed to die upon the cross and be separated from God for a time. Because of this, we have the opportunity of accepting what Jesus has done for us. If we do, our relationship with God will be restored. This is only possible because God became one of us, lived alongside us, and then did what needed to be done in order to close the gap that kept you from God. If you've not responded to Jesus yet, then why not do that today?
Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come to him with thanksgiving. Let us sing psalms of praise to him, for the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. He holds in his hands the depths of the earth and the mightiest mountains. The sea belongs to him, for he made it. His hands formed the dry land too. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God. We are the people he watches over, the flock under his care.
Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Colossians 3:16. The Apostle Paul tells us that the word of Christ should dwell within us, and that it should do so not in a little measure, but richly. To understand what Paul is saying, it is important to know what the meaning of the word dwell is. In the Greek, the word dwell is made up of two different words. The first meaning in, and the second being house. When the words are brought together, it means to live in a house. So to dwell means to have a permanent, comfortable and contented place of residence. Christians should experience the permanent residence of the word of Christ within their lives. Too often, though, the word of Christ only has a temporary place within us. We only turn to it periodically whilst it gathers dust on a shelf. But the request from Paul is for us to let it dwell within our lives. This tells us that we have to make a choice to let it dwell. Further to this, to what extent should the word of Christ dwell within you? Paul says that it should be richly. The word richly means abundance. So the word of Christ should be evident in the life of a Christian, a significant part, not an added extra on a Sunday. Is the word of Christ dwelling within your life? If it's not a permanent fixture in your life, why not make the choice to start letting it dwell within you?
Hello. My favourite Bible character is King Hezekiah of Judah. This is because he is, in my opinion, the greatest king of Judah in the Old Testament. Hezekiah's story is described in 2 Kings chapter 18 to 20 and 2 Chronicles chapter 29 to 32. Hezekiah becomes king after a succession of terrible kings, including his father Ahaz. The rulers before him had turned to idol worship, building statues of gods like Baal and burning incense on high places. His father even practiced child sacrifice. The Israelites suffered at the hands of their enemies at this time. When Hezekiah became king, he reopened the temple and brought Levite priests in and introduced reforms which once again made Judah a nation of the Lord. He reinstituted the Passover feast and destroyed all the idols. Unfortunately, the change in leadership attracted the attention of Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, and he made plans to conquer the city of Jerusalem with his huge army. In his time of need, Hezekiah did not turn to idols like his fathers before him, but instead chose to call out to God. Because of this, Judah escaped almost certain destruction. The Lord sent an angel who destroyed every soldier in the Assyrian camp. King Hezekiah stayed true to the Lord throughout his entire life, and under him the kingdom of Judah prospered. I think we could all learn from following Hezekiah's example.
William Tyndale was an English Bible scholar who wanted the Bible to be available to everybody in their own language. It's hard to imagine a time when owning an English translation of the Bible was a serious crime punishable by death. Priests like Martin Luther had already translated the Bible into German. And like Luther, Tyndale, now an early Reformation influencer, acted on his conscience, doing the right thing in order to reach out to people with the good news of Jesus. Faced with opposition to any translation in England, Tyndale traveled to Germany where he was able to write freely. And it was there in Germany that he completed the first New Testament translation in 1525. Copies were smuggled and circulated around England, provoking outrage among royal and clerical circles. But he resolutely continued with other English translations, all printed and distributed by whatever means possible, getting the Bible into the hands of ordinary people who wanted to know more about God. Tyndale always had to be careful to evade capture. He was constantly aware that his life was in danger. And finally, in an act of betrayal by a companion, Tyndale was captured and put on trial. The final charge was heresy, and he was later executed. A few years after his death, Henry VIII, now estranged from Rome, allowed the first authorized translation of the Bible into English. This Tyndale-based translation became the foundation for later translations, including the famous King James Version. What Tyndale started couldn't be stopped. His conviction, effort, determination and scholarship, against all the odds, had laid the foundation for a greater awareness of Jesus amongst the people. The freeing of the Bible into the hands of people in their own language had begun. Tyndale's devotion and his love of the Bible scripture meant English culture would never be the same again. What are you doing to help other people get access to Jesus?
Can you guess which book of the Bible these 3 verses are from? Verse 1. Before I formed you in a womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. Verse 2. The Lord appears to us in the past, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I drew you with unfailing kindness. Verse 3. For I know the plans I have for you, declared the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Of course, it was Jeremiah. Let us know in the comments below how many verses you needed to guess the book right. See you again soon.
In Matthew 7, Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount, right? He's having this real famous moment in his ministry, and he's preaching loads and loads of wonderful, wonderful things. And then almost out of nowhere, in verse 13, he says this, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few may find it. And maybe if you were there that day, sat on one of the hills or on the ground nearby, listening to Jesus say this, maybe you're like, what? That's rough. Where's that come from? Jesus, what has happened there? You're saying all these wonderful things, but then all of a sudden it's the way to life is hard and only some get there. Jesus, that sounds really tough and really rough. But it's not a new concept, right? This isn't one of the radical things Jesus reveals to the world. There's often times where Jesus reveals something radical and new. But this isn't one of those times. This isn't a new concept. It's maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but it's definitely not new. You can go all the way back to Deuteronomy 30, where Moses lays down a choice to the Israelites. See, in verse 15 of Deuteronomy 30, Moses says this, "See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, walk in obedience to him, keep his commands, decrees, and laws. Then you will live and increase. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land you are entering to possess." See, Jesus is just re-highlighting this almost choice that's been there since the beginning. You could even go further back than Deuteronomy 30, and you could go all the way back to Genesis 1 through 3, and where God says, "Do not eat of this fruit. For if you do, surely you will die." And then Satan goes, "But will you die? Are you sure you'll die?" And then Eve and Adam are struck with this choice of, God has said one thing that's going to lead to life, and then there's this other choice that, will it lead to death? Well, God says it would. See, this choice between life and death has always been there for mankind. It's always been there. And that's because the death that we're talking about here is not physical death, it's spiritual death. See, God is our life force, right? He's our spirit's life force. And when we choose to go our own way, when we choose to do our own thing, we separate ourselves from him and we disconnect from the life force that's in him. And so our spirit ends up dying. And this is because our purpose, our design, who we were made to be, is to be somebody who's walking with God, to go after God, to be with God in all things. See, there's this choice before us right now that says choose his way or choose our own way. Can we go with God, go for God, be about God? Or are we going to go, wow, maybe the other way is a little bit easier? And that's what Jesus highlights for us. The way to life is narrow. It's a little bit harder to walk along. The gate isn't so big. You can't bring as much junk with you. The way to destruction, however, is wide. It's easy to go through. The gate is open. Loads of people go that way, but only a few go the way to life. Only a few choose to go after God, go for God, live for him. See, God set a decision before us, as Moses said, to choose life and prosperity or choose death and destruction. The world wants you to be about yourself, right? And this is the problem we have. Is we're designed to be about God. We're designed to be for God. We're designed to be about the things of God. But the world and the world around us, and even us sometimes, me inside, wants to be about myself, wants to be about the things that are beneficial to me, not the things that are beneficial to other people, not the things that highlight God and glorify God. Sometimes There's me who wants to glorify me and help me. The world wants you to learn about what pleases you and to chase after that. It wants you to live in a way that pleases yourself. Jesus, however, says that we need to deny ourselves. Do you see the contrast? The world wants you to please yourself. Jesus says, deny yourself. We need to pick up our cross and follow him. So we have two dynamically opposed positions. The one says serve God, and the other one says serve yourself as if you were God. You know, there's millions upon millions of self-help books out there. Why? Because they all want to encourage you to focus on yourself. What works for you? What clicks for you? How can you make you the best you? And I think dynamically, we can't do that and serve God. We can't be for ourselves and be for God. Jesus says it, right? He says, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve yourself and serve the kingdom. It's not the kingdom that he sets up. He sets up a kingdom where the first is last and the last is first, where the least are the ones who serve and be glorified. Where he himself humbled himself all the way to death on a cross. The King of Kings let other people beat him, torture him, stick him on a cross. Because that was the Father's will. Because that was the way for others to find life. Because that was serving the Father's will. Wow. How incredible, right? How magnificent is that? Well, we often think that until we have to apply it to our own lives. Because there's a dynamically opposed positions in my life. Am I serving myself or am I serving God? See, to live life in its fullest, we need to follow God and obey him and follow his commands. And so to do so means there's restrictions on the things that we can do, right? You can't follow his commands and not have restrictions. There's some things for us that are just off limits. There's some ways of living that just aren't for us. There's some heart issues that we can't have because we need to sacrifice them to him. It is because of this that we only find life when we follow him. Because this is how he's designed us to be. He designed us to live in service to him. He designed us to have closeness with him. He designed us to honor him. I think the world has too often tried to make God this genie that's around to serve us. You know, if we just throw wishes at him, eventually he might answer and we'll get the jackpot. His being is there to serve us. Well, unfortunately, it's just not the truth. The truth is, he is magnificent. He is glorious. He has always been. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the Almighty. He is the one that we should be reverent of. We should be trembling with fear at his name. Not because he might punish us, but just because of how glorious he is. We were designed to serve him, not him serve us. And so we need to protect ourselves from living for ourselves instead of living for him. Because that's the broad way. That's the way that's going to lead to death and destruction. That's the way that's going to harm us. And so what we need to do is we need to acknowledge the ways that try to trick us and change us and to get us focused in on. And I think this happens in 3 specific ways in our world. 3 specific ways that we should be aware of and focused on. Power, money, and pleasure. 3 powerful ways in which the world tries to distract us, in which Satan tries to tempt you to focus on yourself instead of focusing on others. How often do we hear about powerful people getting to do what they want? Do we not look at people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk and have a little tinge of jealousy in us sometimes, where it'd be like, wouldn't it be great to just be able to do whatever? Wouldn't it be great to have all that power and influence? Where governments are changing policies to suit your business. Where you can get into any restaurant at any point just because of who you are. Where people run around serving you. It's easy for us to get distracted with trying to have power, and when we even have a little bit, get distracted by abusing it and taking advantage of those around us. I mean, I'm sure where you're sat right now, you can think of a bad boss you've had who power tripped a little bit. Or you can think of occasions in yourself, in your life, where maybe you've taken advantage of a position of power. Culturally, we hear all the time about how issues of people in position of power are affecting those around them. And it's because seeking power, going after power, is self-fulfilling. It's all about me. It's not about everybody else. It's because it makes me feel a certain way. I want power because it makes me happy. It makes me glad. It does these things for me. But the problem is when life comes along and it isn't quite working out for you, you're going to use that power badly to abuse other people. And so what does Jesus say? Jesus says, don't seek power. Don't seek power. Seek to serve. Don't seek authority. Seek to serve. Don't lift yourself up. Lift up others. Lift up God. Don't exalt yourself. Exalt God. See, Jesus' position is dynamically opposed to the world's position. Abuse your power. Abuse your power. Make your life better. Jesus says, in all things, serve others, love others, honor others. You know, when they asked Jesus, what is the most important commandment? Jesus says, love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And secondly, love your neighbor as you love yourself. All of the law hangs on these 2 things. All of the law. God's entire will is found in those 2 laws. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul, and love others. There's nothing in there about fulfilling yourself. There's nothing in there about serving yourself and seeking power. Why? Because life is found when you serve others and you serve Jesus. Don't get trapped into this lie and trying to make yourself important. It's just false. It's fake. It's not sustaining or life-giving. Broad is the path to destruction, but narrow is the path to Him. See, Hollywood has sold us a lie when it comes to money, right? And we see it all the time in loads of different places where people look happy and they look fulfilled. Oh, you've got all this car. And I remember, we didn't grow up rich at all. We definitely struggled financially when I was a kid. And I remember watching all these fancy movies of these, normal people in these massive houses. And there's 17 cars and all that sort of stuff, and butlers and all that sort of stuff. And I remember thinking, wow, That would make me happy. That would fulfill me. Having some money would be great. And even now, sometimes I think, money might make a lot of my problems go away. But I've seen a couple of people who are rich, and I remember watching this documentary a couple of weeks ago, and it was about this multi-millionaire, and he was having this really candid moment, and he was talking about how unhappy he was. And see, Hollywood has sold us a lie that money solves everything. If you just had money, your problems would go away. If you just had money and power, then your problems would go away. If you just had all of that stuff, that extra car, the extra laptop, the new camera, the new thing, if you just got to spend money wherever you want, the extra holiday, then all your problems will go away. But the problem is, money doesn't solve the issues of the heart. And so you can have all the money in the world and still be dead, still not have life, still be miserable. Why? Because broad is the path that leads to destruction, which is the way of the world. Gather money, gather money, gather money. But narrow is the path that leads to life, which says give generously. Give without thinking, just give it away. Don't hoard, share it out. Look after the suffering of your neighbor. See, Hollywood says that if you hoard all that money and get wealthy, then you'll be happy. But Jesus says, if you give freely, you'll find life. If you give joyously, you'll find life. And then maybe you're like, well, if I had $1 million, then I could give more. There's this wonderful moment in the scriptures where there's this little old lady, and she goes into the temple to give her offerings, and she gives just one tiny penny, worth nothing really at all. And Jesus looks at her and says she has given more than anybody else, because everybody else was giving out of their surplus. Everybody else had worked and got all this money and were giving out of their extra. But she was giving out of her lack. But she gave more than anybody else. That's what Jesus says. What she gave is worth more. Why? Because that's life. In the kingdom, in the upside down kingdom, in the kingdom of God, that where things don't make sense in the world's way, that is life. When you give freely and sacrificially to the things of God and to the people around you, that is where you'll find life. Not by throwing Rolexes around, but by buying some bread for your neighbor. That is where you will find life. And then the last thing, pleasure, right? And we're all aware of issues with pleasure and sex. That's the big one. But I don't use the term sex, I use the term pleasure. Pornography is a big issue, and sexuality is a big issue, and people having sex outside of marriage. There's a massive article ran by the Cosmopolitan magazine that said, try before you buy. How will you know your marriage will last unless you have sex before marriage? But Jesus says, the way is narrow that leads to life. The way is narrow. Why? Because it's his way. And there's restrictions, and there's caveats, and there's rules. There's places where he's designed things to thrive. So Cosmopolitan says, have sex before marriage so you know if you'll be happy. Whereas Jesus says, if you save sex for marriage, then you'll grow together, you'll learn together, you'll develop together, and instead of being two separate entities trying to please themselves, you'll become one entity designed for God. And in it, you'll find life. See, the beauty in marriage is not knowing that it's going to work out, it's working it out together. Jesus has a plan, and he has a purpose, and he has a way, but the way is narrow. Because it's not about serving yourself, it's about serving the other person. It's about becoming one person in marriage. And then other things are pleasurable too, right? I know friends, and this is just the reality of life, that take drugs because it makes them feel happy and they find pleasure in it. I think we've seen across Canada and the United States the legalization of different drugs, and that's a political argument, but there is this whole desire of do what makes you feel good. If it makes you feel good, then it's not harming anybody else. What does it matter? Well, some things do matter. Some things are really important, not because of the physical, but because of the spiritual consequences. Why? Because Jesus said the way is narrow. His way. You don't get to just do what you want. It's a tough message, right? Nobody likes preaching this sort of stuff. And maybe as a church, as a whole, we've avoided these difficult conversations. You can't just do what you want. You can't. And have life. Because life is found in obedience to God through the narrow path. And so what life says is, I'm not going to buy into that. I'm not going to go use that substance. I'm going to keep my mind clear so I can hear him, rather than trying to wash out the world around me so I don't have to feel. I'm not going to artificially pump my dopamine and my adrenaline and all these other chemicals in me. I'm going to actually see life, serve life, find life in the things that give life to my spirit as well as my body. How many times have we seen stories of people chasing the next high, the next high, the next high? When really, we should be living for others. And I could tell you that people do this with their church life as well. And this is where we come to real faith. Because people do this in church, right? They go around chasing the next high. There's people that travel all over the world chasing the next big spiritual moment, chasing the next big atmosphere, chasing the big concerts. There's people who get upset when the wrong song's played because it doesn't make them tingle inside the way the other one does. We chase things in church that make us feel spiritually alive. And sometimes we put those things over actually chasing God. Sometimes we put the things that make us feel good in church over the things that give us life in church. So that can look like having to sing worship instead of sitting in silence. Maybe sometimes God wants us to sit in silence and wait on him. Sometimes that looks like having to be the person speaking, because speaking at the front gives you a bit of adrenaline kick. Maybe it's having to be the person that has a prophecy or a prayer to offer, because it's nice when people think that you're spiritually on fire. Don't get me wrong, doing things in church is not the issue. The issue is a heart issue. It's the thing inside. Are we serving ourselves or are we serving him? Because wide is the path that leads to destruction. It's easy to fall down the route of self-service. But narrow is the path that leads to life, which says deny yourself and serve him. We need to ignore the temptations of the flesh. Ignore the temptations of the world. We need to give him the things that we are struggling for, the things we're struggling with, and the things that are struggling against us. We need to give him the desires that we want. I want to have a marriage. I want to have a partner. I don't want to be lonely. I want to have a nice house. I want to have this. My wants, my wants, my wants. Even some things that we want that are spiritually good. I want my friend to come to faith. I need to give that to him. So I'm not controlled by my desire for things, but I'm controlled by my desire for him. Do you see what I'm saying there? We need to give up the things that we desire for so that we can have control of our lives in things that we desire for him. So we can seek him, so we can go after him, so we can love him. We need to give him the things that we're struggling with. If you are struggling with alcohol, with drugs, with sex and pornography or other substances, or you're struggling with, bitterness and gossip and all of these other things that we know are not healthy. These are the obvious things, right? The things that everybody knows but sometimes still does. But then you need to give it to him. You need to sacrifice it to him. You need to say, God, this is your way. This is where you deny yourself and pick up your cross. When you say, God, I'm not doing that anymore, that's in your hands. We need to give him the things we're struggling for, give him the things we're struggling with, and we need to give him the things that are struggling against us. You know, there's people in the world that can be quite horrible. Those who say horrible things about us, those who let us down, friends, family, strangers sometimes that are horrible to us and hurt us. But we need to not get bitter over that stuff. We need to give it to him so we can be better. See, what we can tend to do is hold on to hatred because it makes us feel better, right? It makes us feel better to hate against other people. It makes us feel better to be angry against them. It makes us feel better when we hear something bad happening to them and we can cheer. But do you know what that unforgiveness and bitterness that is? It's you drinking poison expecting the other person to die. It won't work. It won't work. All you're doing is harming yourself. And that's what Jesus says. The way to destruction is broad. Hating your strangers is the broad way. Loving your enemies, that's the narrow path, the way to life. That's what Jesus says. Don't hate your enemies. Love them. Pray for them. We need to give him all of this stuff. We need to give him the things we're struggling for, the things we're struggling with, and the things that are struggling against us. And then we need to walk the narrow path. And that looks like this. Walking the narrow path is putting other people's first. It's saying, I'm going to serve above being served. I'm going to make it my priority to make somebody else happy, not myself. I'm going to use my position of power to benefit others, not benefit myself. Walking the narrow path looks like asking what worships him best, not what is just within the limits of okay. See, we can do this all the time, right? We go, well, it's not quite sin. I haven't quite got there. It isn't just wrong. Where's the line? Where's the fence? Where's the barrier? Well, that's self-serving, it's self-seeking. How much can I get away with when we really should be asking, how much can I give back to you, God? How much can I serve you, God? What is the best thing I could do in this situation? Not what is the thing that I could get away with. What is the thing that worships you most, God? It is deciding to walking the narrow path is deciding to put our decision to follow Christ above everything else. It's looking at a situation like being in a pub and the third round starting and everybody's asking, do you want a third beer? And it's asking, what's the wisest decision in response to me following Christ? What's the smartest thing I could do here to honor my first choice, which is to follow him? Is there anything wrong with a third beer? No. Is it the wisest thing? Maybe not. Maybe we need to work out what is the wisest thing for our lives. I know yours might not be beer, but I hope you're applying this to yourself and searching your own heart. What is the wisest thing you can do? Not just what is okay. Lastly, it's putting comfort and pleasure second to doing what is holy. 100 million times a day, you're probably hit with things that tempt you. the desire for you, that call to you, that will make you feel better in the moment. But walking the narrow path is saying, I'm not going to do those things. I am going to serve you, God. I am going to follow you. We need to be a people who deny ourselves and pick up our cross and walk with the Lord. Because only living in submission to the Lord are we truly living our purpose. Only when we sacrifice our comfort for his glory are we living in our purpose. Only when you put him first are you living in your purpose. You were designed to follow God. You were designed for a certain purpose. You know, it was once said, if a fish gets out of the place it was designed to live and goes onto land, it's not free, it's dead. It's not alive, it's not running around, it's not found freedom, it's found death. And this is the same thing for us. We were designed to live in a certain way, and maybe you're sat there going, my life doesn't feel full with all of this rubbish that I've packed into it. Well, I'm telling you, there's a better way, there's a narrow way, there's a way that leads to life. And that way is in Jesus Christ and his commands. We would love it if you wanted to know more about what that means for your life, and you want to work that through with somebody, and you want to apply that practically to your life. If you want to do that, then please send us a message or a comment, and we'll arrange to have a chat and a conversation about what this means for your life specifically. How does this look for you? I really hope you've been blessed by that message. And I really do pray that we as a people, me included, live lives that serve God and not ourselves. Bless you.
In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come
Well, thank you for joining us here at the Well Church today. If you just joined us tonight for the broadcast, then it has been great to have you with us. And I pray that what you've seen and what you have heard tonight has been an encouragement and also a challenge for us to make sure that we are walking that narrow path. And of course, if you've been here already in the building with us this morning, and if you're back this afternoon, it has been also great to have you back with us, you getting your second helping of Well Church Sunday. Well, as ever, if you've enjoyed the broadcast today, then do like and share this on Facebook before you leave. Give someone else the opportunity to listen and to join in with us for themselves. Don't keep the good things that's happening here at the Well Church to yourself. This week, our activities are as normal with Revive on Monday. That's at 7 p.m. Revive is for our youth who are year 7 and upwards. They're going to be in the building tomorrow night when they've got some great activities lined up, and that's going to be led by Beth. And if you'd like to join them, and if you're of the right age, then please do feel free to come along. And if you'd like to know a little bit more before you do that, then get in touch with us through Messenger or on the website. There is a contact us section there. On Wednesday at 7 p.m, we've got our Refresh. And this week it will be Harry who will be leading that. So it would be great if you're able to come along and enjoy that and also share in some together time as we gather together as a church community. That's on Wednesday. Then we're back to next Sunday, both in the building at 10:30 for our Regather event. And then at 5 p.m. when we will be streaming as ever on Facebook, YouTube, DLive as well as Twitch. Please do try to make at least one of those because Harry will be speaking again. And this time it will be on the subject of Lord, give me a sign. How many times have we said that? Well, you know what? It's bound to be great. So don't miss out on being with us for at least one of those. Well, that does bring us to the end of the broadcast for today. As ever, thanks for being with us this evening here at the Well Church. If you're able, please do try to get along to those midweek events, as it really is good to meet up with different people in person. But if that's not possible and you live too far away, then we're going to look forward to having your company with us when we will be broadcasting again next Sunday at 5 p.m. Have a great week. God bless. Goodbye.
If you've liked it today, don't forget to press share and help someone else watch the Well Church for themselves.